Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Collision Live. We're back finally, and it is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined at the desk, as I always am, by the mosquito bite to my, oops, I forgot, bug spray again, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Is that a reference to hanging out at our house the other day? And did you forget to bring mosquito
That is
spray?
if you can, thankfully the
I've
camera
built-
doesn't show my legs that are just covered in like bloody scratch spots.
Well,
Happy
it's-
4th of July.
yeah. I've built up an immunity over the years to mosquitoes, so I've just I'm above that now.
Yeah, well, I'm still down in the gutter of the outdoors. But hey, we're glad to be back. It has been a while. I need like a week or two hiatus turned into what, 2 months?
Yeah, almost. I think.
So, and we'll be giving more updates. I was finishing up a big writing project that I'm excited about. Glad that it's almost done.
We all are.
We are. But I've been itching to get back in the saddle, get back to some cultural conversations. A lot of stuff has happened in culture in the last 2 months. Obviously, we're not going to get into it all on this show today, but we'll just kind of slowly over the next couple of weeks, we'll be unpacking what's going on. So thanks for joining us, guys. If you haven't joined us before, this is just our weekly live stream show podcast where we break down what's going on in culture, kind of from a Christian biblical perspective of just being aware of what's happening, kind of reading the signs of what's happening in culture, the ideologies and the trends, and then also just, hey, as Christians, how can we contribute to this, discuss it, learn from it? So there's always a lot of stuff going on, so why don't we just jump into it with our first segment? We have Cultural Conversations. So kind of the first cultural story that kind of got on my radar was some news that was circulating a couple of days ago about the Chronicles of Narnia, the beloved C.S. Lewis kind of allegorical 7 books that I know a lot of Christians and just all people that grew up with those books as children have a kind of a fond attachment to. My own kids read them this last year and just fell in love with the stories.
Yeah, they're at a sort of prime Narnia age, I think.
Yeah, they are. They're 8, so they are perfect for kind of that target audience. But kind of Narnia has been dormant for a while. Aslan has not been on the move. I think it was 2010 was the last Narnia Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
A long Narnian winter.
Yeah, it has been a long winter, always winter, never Christmas. Kind of in contrast to like the Lord of the Rings, which again is sort of my jam. But this seems like there's always Lord of the Rings stuff. There's the show Rings of Power. There's an amazing Lego set which I now own, which will be maybe a host corner in the future. There's video games. There's always stuff going on for Lord of the Rings and culture. But Narnia is kind of just you almost forget about it, which is surprising. Like right now, when there's so much fantasy, like fantasy is in right now. There's so many shows and stuff that it kind of makes sense that there would be a new Narnia movie. So this was just sort of announced. I think it was already kind of like rumored, but it seems like it was like more officially confirmed just the other day, kind of as like a side comment in an article about the upcoming Barbie movie, that the director of the Barbie movie, Greta Gerwig, was announced that she will be writing and directing 2 new Narnia movies, which will be released on Netflix, which now owns the rights. There were no like information like which 2 of the books are they going to do? Are they going to?
Because they've done 3.
They've done 3,
so
and again,
far.
this won't be like a continuation at all from like the movies that there were. So did they start at the beginning? Did they do some of like the undone ones, which maybe get away from like as clear of like the Christian allegory stuff? But it's sort of been an interesting like the reaction to this news on social media has been kind of mixed, at least in my own like anecdotal experience, where like a lot of people are excited that like finally we need Narnia stories. These are like these deep theological stories, which seems like what we need, like in contrast to like the darker, like The Witcher or like House of the Dragon, like the more like mature, dark fantasy, gritty. Narnia is like the other side of that coin. So there's a lot of people excited, and there's almost surprisingly, at least in my own like surveying of social media, like predominantly just like trepidation of, do we trust sort of Hollywood and like Netflix and like non-Christian directors to handle these stories like in a way that does them justice and honor, or like is it just going to be like, here's Narnia, but not how you remember it. It's a modern Narnia, like, without all the Jesus stuff and more of the, like, I don't know. And I think there's several things to kind of, I think we can approach this like as the movies, but also I think just sort of larger issues is like as far as how we engage with these sort of things. But what are your initial sort of thoughts on these movies?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. Like I think Greta Gerwig has a pretty good track record as far as like a director. So I think she's obviously very competent and very talented in writing and directing, and so I think that's obviously a plus. I don't know her like familiarity with the source material, and so that's always I feel like that would be sort of one big question is like, are you coming at this like brand new, or is this like you grew up with these stories and so like you're very familiar with it and are able to tell a true version of these stories? Yeah, I mean, especially with it being Netflix, you sort of think how unfortunately modern and progressive are they going to try and make this? I don't think it's a matter of if, it's probably a matter of degree. Like how can they make this as like unclassic as possible? You know what I mean? Because like there's certain stories I think you can tell in a real sort of classic way that isn't just infused with like the politics of today and like the zeitgeist of the culture today.
Because I think that's even
I think
why
that's the concern.
I think there's many reasons why, but like at least to me, like why the Narnia stories have been absent, like it's because they are like less palpable for like a modern secular audience than something like Lord of the Rings, which like is very much Christian, like at its foundation. But a lot of the like more like the virtues and stuff are things that even like non-Christians can, heroism and like friendship and like, bravery and like pity and mercy and like some of those things, which is like, hey, those are just good values that are, they're rooted in Christianity, but they can be, they're widely accepted as good things. Whereas something like Narnia, like there's Aslan dying on a stone table is like Aslan's Jesus. Like there's things that it's very clearly, this is not widely, it's not as like widely accessible.
Well, and I think while you're reading that question or comment from Monty, I think one thing would be, one difference, and we've talked about this before, but sort of between Tolkien and Lewis, like Lewis's Narnia is very much written with the perspective of like children in the 1940s and 50s who get transported into some fantastical land. And so there's always that tie back to like 1940s Britain. And so sentiments and like culture has changed a lot since 1940s Britain. And so I think having that tie back to like, a time in our actual culture, I think means it's more difficult to adapt and play with, I think, in a more modern setting. Whereas I think with Lord of the Rings, it's a total fantasy. So there's no tie really back to like, oh, you can see where like, this person from the 1950s went to this place. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's almost like because it was written in a way that sort of captured a lot of the sentiments of the time, it's difficult or more difficult to sort of transverse that into like modern time, I guess.
Yeah, because you're almost affirming or like depicting Lewis's like very culturally in the moment perspective on culture. A comment here says the skepticism about Gerwig shows why we can't have nice things. Do we want good directors to make these adaptations, or do we want cheesy Christian fare? And I do think that is some of the crux of like because again, like we love like the Lord of the Rings movies are great. Peter Jackson's an atheist. Like he made those movies and like stayed faithful, in my opinion, as a Tolkien nerd, like to the spirit of like Tolkien and like the religious things, which doesn't necessarily mean Gerwig will take the very same approach. Like other people have not. Like the Wrinkle of Time movie, which is another Christian classic, they watered down all that, like the spiritual theological stuff. Like, so like I get some of the concern, but I do think there is again, because I think we have a picture. One of the stories we didn't, which sort of ties in that we didn't cover, was with the controversy about the Chosen show, where there was a bunch of like backlash came when there was a like a pride flag was depicted like on a camera, like as they were like in a behind the scenes thing, and like a bunch of like Christians and got upset about that. That like, as though that itself sort of dilute like almost this like expectation that like because it's a Christian show, like everyone involved on like any level of the production has to be Christian, or else we can't do it justice. Which is a sort of again, one, it's an unrealistic expectation. I think people don't realize how many people are involved in create, and like the fact that like a cameraman holding a camera doesn't believe the same things as like the one writing the scripts.
Yeah.
There's different levels of like of influence, but I do think it does come down to like the story. Like, does the like, is it Christian just because like a Christian tells it, or is there something about that story that like a great director, if they're faithful to it, can still create this like a work of art that Christians can affirm?
Yeah.
Without it being.
Yeah, which I think is entirely possible, and like I think I am like sort of to Monty's point. I feel like my initial thought is a sort of excitement about Greta Gerwig directing this, just because I feel like she just has an interesting take on things, and she has a track record of making really good movies, and I know, and I didn't see it, but I know that like her remake of Little Women was pretty widely acclaimed.
Yeah, it was good.
Like it was good, and that's something I think, like, if that's anything to go by, then I think I feel pretty confident that she'll do well, and I don't know that it's going to be too like too modern and progressive-y, if that, or liberal maybe is the right word for it. But so I think overall, I'm really intrigued by her taking the directing, and like Monty said, it's interesting having her direct it, because it is majority of perspective from Lucy and Jill. The stories themselves are sort of from
most of the
girl's
except for maybe
perspective.
the first one where there's like two of each, it becomes progressively more like female centric. I know one of like the big controversies with the Narnia story, spoiler alert for like 60-year-old books, is that one of like the children like ultimately isn't allowed back into Narnia because like the only reasoning is like she got into like makeup and like basically she became too like cosmopolitan, which has always been like I know J.K. Rowling, like, a bunch of like writers and stuff have just always hammered that as like this is out of sync with like a modern progressive like feminist, which is very much Gerwig.
Yeah.
So I do know there will be things that
but I think there's ways, because I think you could look at that and say, okay, so what is he trying to say with the source material, and adapt that to something more modern. And so I think there are probably many ways to address that isn't necessarily being unfaithful to the.
And it should be encouraging too, like the original, and then we'll move on. Like the 3 movies we did have weren't made by like a Christian studio, and those you have Aslan dying on like almost like very overt spiritual Christian themes stayed in there. Like, of course, those movies didn't necessarily do all that good, so maybe I don't know if that will make people shy away from it. And times have changed since like in the last 15 years.
But I think on the whole, I think it's exciting to have somebody of Gerwig's caliber come on board with this and sort of move it forward. So I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic about what it means, and I think sort of, and this will tie into some of our later discussion on cynicism, but like I feel like bringing some of these stories into the mainstream again, I think can be a bit of an antidote to the vast amounts of cynicism that sort of plagues a lot of our movies.
Yeah, it might be something that kind of starts changing kind of steering the ship towards more of that kind of optimist stuff that Christians, I think, can more readily affirm. Another thing that Christians and really all people on this planet Earth can affirm is our next segment of our show, which we have Host Corner. So as some of you guys know, I grew up in Canada, spent most of my life early life from when I was like 2 till in my early 20s, living in the great country of Canada. And actually just recently, kind of throughout our hiatus, went back with my family. We were visiting some family we have up there, and taking my kids back to the homeland and kind of showing them around. And one of the most exciting things about returning to Canada is ketchup chips. I know a lot of Americans where I live now, kind of uncultured Philistines that they are, usually respond with a revulsion about the idea of ketchup chips, which just really shows their complete ignorance, because ketchup chips, undoubtedly, this is top tier. If it's not number one, it's like 1B for all-time great flavors of chips. It's crazy. A lot of Americans that will critique or condemn ketchup chips, also like dip literally everything that they eat in ketchup, as though that's not gross. So I don't think, Dave, potatoes, we dip fries in ketchup. Why not make crispier fries and put ketchup seasoning on it? So if you haven't tried ketchup chips, now and then you can find them scattered throughout the more enlightened grocery stores. Like we'll feature international brands, ketchup chips. So definitely worth checking out. It will change your life. You'll never be the same. It really is, I would say, a spiritual experience. But Sam, have you, because you were married to my sister who grew up in Canada, I don't know if she's is on board with ketchup chips.
I don't think she is.
Have you ever tried ketchup
I have
chips?
tried. They're fine.
Fine is not what I was looking for.
They're passable. I think they're all right. Better than some, not as good as others.
And by not as good as others, you just mean like other brands of ketchup chips. Definitely go for the Lay's if you can.
Yeah.
Real quick, is our crew cam working? I know Steven is on our crew. We'll see if this works. He might be able to back me up. Ketchup chips, where do they rank, and why is it number one?
I don't know why it's number one, but just growing up, it's the top tier for me. That, and I think we talked about earlier, the all dressed. So, I mean, it's a classic for, I guess, Canadians, but.
Yeah, and it should be one of our great exports to the world. I don't know why it has not yet been. But hey, ketchup chips, go on eBay, go find on Amazon, pay like $6 extra for an import fee, because it will change your life. Something that hasn't necessarily been changing lives, at least not for the better, is the much kind of talked about, buzzworthy, controversial show, The Idol. So this is kind of a story that we would have talked about. Hey, we've been out for 2 months. My segue game is still on point. So this is a show. It just wrapped its first, much talked about first season. It seems like maybe its only season, going by some of the reviews, both critically and audience.
It was a brief first season.
It burned hot and then it burned out. So this is a show that there's been this, even before it released, if you're not familiar with some of like the drama of it, was this like Rolling Stone wrote just like a total takedown article like before this thing came up of like all the behind the scenes drama and like what a garbage heap this thing was going to be, and then it released and it's like, hey, they were right.
Yeah.
It is a garbage
Told
heap.
you.
And again, this is something that is one of the rare situations where like everyone hates it. Like it's not, like, well, critics liked how daring it was, but audiences didn't. Or like audiences sort of like that trashy stuff, but critics were like, it's like, no, critics and audiences are like, this is garbage. Like this is not a good show. It's not a show that, again, obviously, this is not something that me or Sam have watched.
No.
Not necessarily on the
Can't say that it's on the list.
not
even.
high on the list. So we're not obviously able to like break down, in episode 2. Did you? But kind of what I found interesting about this show is you sort of see like, because like obviously Christians are always like have heightened interest in like the sexualization in media, and like they push back about that, and kind of like they'll note that and condemn shows that push that. This is sort of one of those rare shows where like even like secular culture and like Hollywood is doing that, saying like, hey, this is wrong, this is trashy, this is not like in any way edifying, and like and kind of the crux of it is like which ties into some other stories that we've talked about here before, but like that like the concept of this show is supposed to be to kind of like shine a light on like the sexual like exploitation of like pop stars and like celebrities, and like kind of like the Britney Spears types, and like kind of how culture wrongly just turns them into like sex objects, and like just real centralized, and it kind of loses the humanity.
And in order to do so accurately,
And in order to do so, they say, why don't we tell that, make that message by totally sexualizing and like objectifying our
exploiting our actors.
which is kind of the leads like The Weeknd. Again, that's not I'm a metalhead, so I don't know much of The Weeknd's music, but he's making his acting debut and maybe the end of his acting career. And then is it Lily Depp, Johnny Depp's daughter, sort of her first big role as like the female star. But there's some interesting, and then we can kind of get into this the nuance of this. But even like some of the people like behind the scenes, so again they scrapped this whole show and like redid stuff. Like there's tons of drama going on. But one of the people kind of working in the production, I think, summed up the issue. They were sharing this, I think, with Rolling Stone. Said, what I signed up for was a dark satire of fame and the fame model in the 21st century. One production member told the outlet, it went from satire to the thing it was satirizing. Basically, it became the thing that it was trying to say was bad. Which is just sort of interesting, like how do you, because this isn't the only show, like this, what came to mind was like one of our first ever Collision Live episodes where we talked about cuties, do you remember?
Yeah.
Like the show that was supposed to be about like sexualizing like young children, like in like the dance scene or whatever, and like
in France. Was it
I think it was
set
like
in France?
Yeah,
I mean,
like,
I think it was French.
and then like it became like a big outrage because like it was a show that like sexualized kids to try and like talk about it. Isn't it bad when people do things like this? And they showed it. That's essentially what this showed. But have you followed, like, what's your
Yeah, I mean, I can't say, I mean, I've read some on it. I can't say I've followed it, but it just sounds like one of those things where it's like, I don't know, it sounds like maybe there are just a lot of creeps involved and like bad faith actors making this. And I don't know. I mean, I guess the blame lies with the directors and creators of it.
which is the creator of Euphoria, which is another
Which
problematic
I think is
show
I was
on
going to say,
HBO.
like, that's not shocking at all that he was also involved. So yeah, I mean, it just seems like kind of sort of a thinly veiled reason to just make a real like sex heavy show, maybe. And it's like, well, but we're trying to show how bad the industry is. And it's like, okay, like it sounds like you just wanted to make a movie with like lots of sex and fame in it. Like, I don't know, like that just seems kind of what it is. But again, like I haven't read too far into it. But I think I will say that it is interesting that shows like this are being sort of universally panned, obviously by Christians, but by like critics and fans and just the whole industry is like, yeah, we're gonna take a pass on this one. So
what's interesting, this is another story that we just haven't, and maybe at some point we will.
We've been off for a while, so there's a lot to catch up on.
Is that there has been sort of this movement lately of like Hollywood questioning, or people within Hollywood like questioning itself, as far as like there's been several like a handful of like actors and stuff on their shows that have like spoken out against like, do we need more sex in our shows? Like, or what's his name? The actor's name that sort of basically said like he asked to stop the directors like to tone that down. He's like, I know I got to do some, I signed a contract, but like I've always been uncomfortable with that. And like essentially, like, what's the purpose? Like, is it really, like, because you hear a lot of like, especially young, which is Lily Depp, like younger actresses or actors like talking. It's all about being vulnerable and it's art, and like, but like they're usually the only ones that are like as soon as actors like, get enough of a
right.
a
it's
status,
almost
like,
there's almost like a due payment that you sense in a lot of these things. Like when you're young and you're just getting started, you're gonna not have a lot of clothes on. But once you've gone through that sort of hazing, then it's like, oh, well, then you can become like a serious actor and you can set your own.
Because like most of the Game of Thrones actors have come out,
yeah,
with that, like sort of they did that, and at the time it was all like, well, we know we're doing like a pushing the boundaries show. This is art. This is acting. Like then as soon as they're like now they're like household names, it's like,
yeah, it's like
I don't want to do
not
that anymore. Like
it.
we probably shouldn't have done that, and it does seem very much like it's just sort of this unspoken like. It's like a facade. Like the industry, even like the Me Too, dealt with some of the sexual stuff like behind the scenes, but like in front of the camera, there's still sort of this like this pressure, this expectation that like these young people, actors, actresses, like you still gotta kind of do that, and like that you need that, and like pretending that it's some high art when
Yeah.
really it's just sort of these like fantasies by these like male directors or whatever that are
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's probably true, and I think that's, I mean, you know, I feel like it's probably going to continue to hopefully go by the wayside, and as more and more people are less comfortable with it and just realize that it's kind of a total game for people to just sort of to do these things. It's not necessary, like just, you know, just because you're doing it doesn't mean that it's like art. Like it's more than likely just
because
exploitation.
even shows like Game of Thrones, like like that type of content, like in a lot of these shows, like starts off pretty heavy, then like as people get in, like it's almost like it becomes this like cheap way to draw in like audiences.
Yeah.
Like, and then like once they don't need to do that, they can have less and kind of move on from that and like speak
Yeah.
out against that. And so it is. I think it is something that I think is, although like a show like The Idol, as a Christian, you're like, that's not what we need. Like, you know, we don't
Yeah.
need more of that stuff on screens. Like, I do think there is a positive spin that like society, like in culture, wider culture, is also kind of waking up to like, do we need these sort of sexual, like, is that really
Yeah.
empowering, like we're pretending it is, or like should we just do away with this and like just tell stories and not just sort of cheap draw male eye audiences in. But hey, let us know what you guys think of that show, if you guys have followed more of it, or if you've taken the plunge and tried to watch any of it, if it is as vile as the trailers and some of the reviews and stuff have made it seem. Kind of our last story for today. It's actually based on an insightful, enlightening article that we'll be publishing probably later today or else tomorrow. Sort of a trend that I've noticed. Again, I'm still processing it. It's this thing that actually watching the latest Indiana Jones movie kind of got me thinking about, where that movie starts with like a flashback, de-aged Harrison Ford, which is awesome, great opening sequence, and then it kind of like transitions from like, you know, the young hero that we grew up with, very much to like the Indiana Jones is like an old 80-year-old Harrison Ford in like a rocking chair, and he's grumpy, and he's like, one of the first things you learn about him is like he's separated from his wife, and like he's just sort of this unhappy character.
Yeah.
Essentially gets like the we have in the comments says, I've noticed that content-wise, the worst episode of a TV show is usually the first one.
Which is ironic because I feel like the pilot episode should be the best one.
Well, and I think Monty is implying too, like it's not necessarily quality-wise, but like
that's
you
true.
stuff the most, like, you know,
Let's get it as racy as we can.
Yeah, you make it super,
yeah.
like you attract people in, and then kind of create buzz, and then you move into like just telling like a show. But like with the Indiana Jones, almost like the Luke Skywalker treatment of like the heroes of our past, like, you know,
they're all just old cynics now.
Yeah, like we're still sort of tied to this nostalgia where we want to like revisit these characters, but like we're not comfortable with the fact that like they lived a happy life and fulfilling life. Like they're all broken down and cynical, and kind of as I was thinking about that, there was a couple of different articles of like upcoming properties that all seem to sort of tie into this this trend of just sort of cynicism in Hollywood. So a couple, let's see if I can find the quotes. What's our first one that we have? With the upcoming Barbie movie, bring back Greta Gerwig. Kind of the slogan for this movie is, if you love Barbie, this movie's for you. If you hate Barbie, this movie is for you. And if you kind of get into like them unpacking, which one of those two would you fall into? Are you
love or hate?
Yeah, love or hate.
You know, I will plead the fifth on this one. I'll just say, you know, we'll see.
I will say, having a younger sister, Barbie houses make great forts for action figures and
That's
G.I.
true.
Joes to have battle.
That's true.
And someone to kidnap and save.
Yeah, and as someone with 2 girl daughters,
you got do you have a few Barbies in the?
There may be a few dolls.
But kind of what, as you like get into like as they unpack what that slogan like in the article, very much like we want to tell a movie that celebrates Barbie, but we're also very aware that like, you know, although they seem like something that we enjoyed as a kid, like in adult hindsight, like they're actually very problematic and like disruptive, you know, like reinforcing unrealistic body types and a bunch of other issues and things. And like, and again, we haven't seen the Barbie movie; it's not out yet. But like, the Gerwig talking about like, we're trying to balance that of like, hey, we like Barbie, but like we also need to make sure people know that like we're aware that Barbies are actually bad and girls probably
so
shouldn't.
that's she's not the role model for you, but like we'll continue to sell millions of
Yeah.
millions
But
of
anyways,
dolls and make new ones and stuff.
and kind of right on the heels of that, there's announced J.J. Abrams was he's making a Hot Wheels movie, which we all asked for, and he was sort of sharing like
finally
his vision for it, where he said that they finally cracked the code. They struggled to find a story that would be compelling, and they found one which would be emotional, grounded, and gritty.
Which, if there's anything that is emotional, grounded, and gritty, it's Hot Wheels.
Yeah. Basically, Fast and Furious for kids is what they're trying to make. And kind of the last one, was I think the most like succinctly captures sort of this like spirit that I've been noticing, like this trend. They're making a Barney movie, the purple dinosaur that taught us all to love each other and clean up our toys. He's coming back to the screen, but not the way that we remember him. So one of the execs kind of in charge of this explained the vision for the Barney movie, saying this, said, "We're leaning into the millennial angst of the property rather than fine-tuning this for kids. It's really a play for adults. Not that it's R-rated, darn it, but it will focus on some of the trials and tribulations of being a 30-something growing up with Barney and just the level of disenchantment within the generation."
Yeah.
Which again, and maybe the movie will turn out fine. Maybe it'll be interesting. Maybe it'll be a nuance. I don't know. I don't know when that's coming out.
You never know, Daniel. You just
there's
never
a chance.
know.
I like to be a glass half full kind of person, but to me, that quote kind of is like embodies so much of what. Like,
if ever there was a quote that embodied like what you're getting at, I think
it's sort of like the dissatisfaction of like all our heroes, like, hey, they're broke, they're terrible people too. They, couples that you liked, didn't stay together, they're not married anymore. Like heroes that were optimistic, like now they're cynical and lost belief. Like, the toys that you liked, like that you enjoyed in the past, like actually they're problematic. And like,
do you think, and there's I guess, many ways you could take this and probably many reasons for the heightened level of cynicism in our world today. But do you think one factor in this is that I guess the millennial generation, they're growing up and they're not having as many kids or kids at all, and so rather than like continue to be hopeful, like there's some cynicism when you're growing up, like, oh, life's not what you thought it would be, but then you have kids and that's definitely not what you thought it would be, but it's like it's sort of like doing things with your kids again. Like there's sort of this reigniting of like your love of life, I think. And if that's largely missing from a generation like our generation, could that also be sort of like contributing to all the cynicism that people see?
Yeah, because I don't know, because I think like, even like I don't know what like if the guy talking about Barney, if like he has kids, like I don't know what the creatives like why there's sort of this like, everything has to be gritty and real, and like why there's just such a like an abashment towards like hope and optimism, and like, we've talked about that before, like why Superman can't even get a movie anymore. Yeah, he's too hopeful. Like we need heroes that are more like, that aren't really
flawed
good people, that are more like us.
To sometimes kill the bad guys, or
sometimes they kind of are the bad guys. Like, and I do think a lot of it, or at least some of it, is connected to just sort of this obsession we have lately of like nostalgia. We're still stuck in like with the things of our past. Yeah. But I explained it almost like it's like an adult playing with like their childhood action figures. Like we're still with the same things, but like we're different. Like it's not the same. Like
right.
It's not as fun as it was when you were like 8 to have like your Star Wars action figures fight. Like now it's more like, well, we buy those toys, but we keep them in the box, and maybe they'll be worth money. Like it's more this like adult, because there just isn't a lot of the like the original stories that sweep us up and like fill us with joy. It's just sort of like, I don't know, maybe like a reluctance to sort of just move on without sort of reevaluating everything and like seeing it through adult eyes. Like kids like Barney's, but like as adults we know Barney was actually a bad thing. Like.
Yeah, I mean, It's hard to say exactly why this is. I mean, I think there's a lot of contributing factors. I think one, like social media, because not to blame all of the ills of our society on social media, but
Just most of them.
if the shoe fits, I think there is just, it's so like being cynical is such a easy and lazy thing to do. And so I think and I think just even personally in your own life, like if you're like being cynical about something is just the easy path. Like I think anybody can be cynical. It takes zero creativity, I think, to be cynical. And so I think if you have a lot of people who have that tendency, which I think is sort of maybe a natural tendency for a lot of people, and then they're sharing that on social media, then it kind of becomes, well, the cool kids are being cynical about this thing, and like you don't want to be like, hey guys, I thought it was a neat movie, and so there's that sort of social fear about like being positive about something. And so I think because being a cynic is so like easy, and a lot of people can share their cynicism, it sort of is that almost like a sort of a virus effect of cynicism that can, I think, permeate more now in today's sort of connected culture than it could have even, back when all these great movies that we love first came out.
Because there is this sense of like discontentment or like unhappiness. Like we have like more like movies and shows and stuff than like we've ever had in the history of the world, and like, but we don't really like most of them. Like it's just sort of we're like disillusioned with them. Like we sort of, and I think it does become almost this drug of like things are bad, like the world's bad. Like we're bombarded with like social media or news or whatever telling us how bad things are. That like it is hard to like step out of that and be like, well, and there's good things in the world. Like there's joy.
Because there is. And I think that's the thing. Like there are legitimately great things happening in the world all the time. But it's like, again, that's, it's so much easier to just join in the pain train of like, oh, it's all misery and it's not worth trying to create anything or do anything.
Which
good.
I share in the article. Again, there's some level of like cherry picking with this discussion of like, not every story that gets made is cynical. Like there's but it just seems like there's enough of those sort of comments.
But I think it does show that those stories that aren't cynical seem to do very well.
Because in the article that we'll have coming out, I reference like Top Gun Maverick, which is like Maverick definitely doesn't like he's had pain and he's dealt with stuff in his life, but like he doesn't get the Luke Skywalker treatment. Like the movie picks up and like years later, he's not just like he hates life and he needs to like he's enjoying riding motorcycles still. Need for Speed, like he's still like a hero, like an idealistic hero. And again, that movie did great. Like the Super Mario movie is the other one where it's like, hey, this isn't like we need to like deconstruct culture through Mario, and like why did Mario actually lead kids to think that women are only princesses that need say, like there's none of this like culture. It's just like, hey, you like Mario? Here's Mario. Like we like Mario. Like it is optimistic and like hopeful, and like you just see how some of those stories resonate with people. And like stand out from the sort of here's all the bad stuff. Here's these stories where all your heroes are like grumpy and hate the world and like tortured Batman types.
I think that's I don't know what else there is to say about it, but that just I think culture is very cynical right now, and if you can put stuff out there that isn't cynical, more power to you.
And I think that is like an opening for like Christians and stuff to tell stories and stuff and like fill that niche. Not that it has to be like unrealistically happy, like not like sentimental and like that kind of stuff, but just that hey, there's a place for like hopeful and like optimism and stuff. But hey, I do think it is telling this sort of as a reflection of sort of where our culture is. A lot of the movies that used to sort of like inspire us out of that cynicism and like inspire us to like be hopeful now just reinforce this like loop of like, no, things are bad. Like even fictional worlds and universes are bad. But something that is not bad is our review output here at the Collision. So again, we've been off for a couple months. So there's a lot of reviews that we've been doing. Because again, we've been off of the live streams, but we've still been doing reviews. So I encourage you guys, if you guys haven't been keeping up, we've still been hitting a lot of the big movies. We have like Indiana Jones, like I said, Elemental, which has been a much talked about movie because it's Pixar, and those movies are always buzzword notable. I liked the movie quite a bit, maybe more than some people did, although there is some problems, I think, in it. And then we also just released a written review for The Sound of Freedom, which is a movie that just came out. I did not write the movie or review. I have not seen the movie yet. We had Cap Stewart, a guest author, wrote that review. So if you're interested in that, again, that's very much like a faith-based light. I don't think it's like goes overly faith-based, but on a very important issue of like sex trafficking. I think it's a pretty heavy movie through Angel Studios, which releases The Chosen, so they got a lot of buzz right now. So if you're curious about any of those movies, encourage you guys check out our website, thecollision.org, or else go to our YouTube page and watch our videos as we kind of break down sort of all the movies. I know there's a bunch of movies coming up. I know Sam is going to get a ticket for the Barbie movie, and I'll be getting a ticket for Oppenheimer. And,
You betcha.
Maybe we'll record those reviews together, both sides of the coin. But those movies are coming up. And then I think I got a ticket for Mission Impossible, which has like a 98 Rotten Tomato score. So
Which
sign me up.
Oh man! Like speaking of like content and like a property that like just doesn't age, along with its leading actor, like those Mission Impossible movies, like they're so good.
Yeah, there's no lag. Like those things are all after 2, like 3 on up is just like, what crazy thing can Tom Cruise do? So I'm very much excited for that movie. I don't really know anything about it, if it'll be controversial, but I'm expecting it to be awesome. So I think
But he does jump off of high places with parachutes. So what more?
Which is that checks all the boxes for me. So could you just keep your eyes open for that? But any kind of final thoughts, comments?
I will say that during our long hiatus, I did a podcast with Eli Price for The Establishing Shot. So you can go check that out wherever you get podcasts, The Establishing Shot. He's doing a whole series on Wes Anderson, and so I jumped in on one of those episodes.
Because you know a thing about Wes Anderson.
I've seen a few of his films, yes. So it's, I'm not necessarily a Wes Anderson devotee, but I do appreciate.
You've dabbled.
I've dabbled, as I do with most things.
So check that out. Maybe we'll throw a link to that podcast, and then you can support what he's doing with the Establishing Shot podcast as well. But thanks for joining us, guys. It's been good to be back. We've been excited to, kind of eager to get back in the saddle, and we will be back. So we'll be back next week at Thursday at noon. So join us then. There's always crazy stuff going on in the culture. But thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for joining. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.